We're starting a brand new series, if you didn't know today, called Jesus for President. And we just finished up a series called Happy, Happy, Happy. Last Sunday, we talked a little bit about how when we serve, that really is a great way to experience happiness in our lives. And when we do it on a continual basis. And this week, a couple things. First of all, let me just share with you a little bit about the future. This Friday, Saturday, we're helping the Bachman family put a roof on their house, and we're excited to be able to help one of our own. Jessica Bachman is our children's minister, and we're going to do that. Their home's located in Marine. So Friday, Saturday, there's sign up and stuff out in the connections area, and there's more information. You can talk to anybody there. But this last week, for me, I was able just to kind of check out and serve a little bit. And something I don't normally do. And so Kids Against Hunger is a ministry that we partner with on occasion, and they do disaster relief meals all over the world. And so we partner with them quite a bit. They are moving warehouses. They're moving their world headquarters to downtown Omaha, Nebraska from out west. And so a couple of years ago, they sent me to forklift class to get certified on a forklift. And so I got to unload semis for 2 days this week at Kids Against Hunger. Here's the cool thing. Here's the good news and bad news. Good news is I didn't destroy the new forklift. I didn't scratch it, didn't do anything to it. I didn't destroy anybody's truck, semi. I didn't destroy any beam. I didn't run into anything. Except there's about 700 kids somewhere in the world that are going to starve to death because I destroyed 2 bags of soy. So other than that, I did okay. So that was the bad news. I killed a little soy, but it's okay. I'll replace it. Anyhow, I can't tell you enough, but just as far as what it means to serve others and serve people, and whether it's driving a forklift, whether it's working with our kids here, no matter what it is, it does bring us happiness and joy. Whether it's putting a new roof on somebody's house or whatever it takes. So thank you for serving. Thank you for doing what you do. So we're in a brand new series called Jesus for President. And a lot of candidates talk about change, but rarely do we see anything positive. But rarely do we see any social change happen. And there are new cabinets, new policies, judges, laws, but still life goes on pretty much the same from one candidate to the next. And maybe change can't be voted on. Maybe it's not legislated. Maybe it doesn't happen through policies and its steam doesn't flow from Capitol Hill. Perhaps change truly emerges from the hearts of its people. And I have found that to be true, and this is what Jesus taught, and this is what he advocated, and true change is not about a what, it's about a who, and his name is Jesus. So I'm excited because we're going to take a few weeks here and we're going to talk about Jesus and kind of his spin on the world we live in, and his spin on politics, his spin. And here's the crazy thing. I've seen, it's crazy to me how there's so much negative ads, so much, everybody just tries to dig up dirt on everybody else. Everybody tries to make their strengths somebody else's weaknesses, and they exploit all of everybody else's weaknesses and all of it. It's just crazy to see that. And I believe that in this world and in the world we live in, we all need something different, and we need hope. And we don't need to know everybody's dirt and all that stuff. We just need, who can really change the world? Well, there's only one. There's only one person I know and who I love who can change the world. And his name is Jesus. You see, a long time ago, there were no kings, there were no presidents, there were no, they just didn't exist. Thousands and thousands of years ago, and then one day, this group of people, this story's in 1 Samuel. Samuel was there was a prophet or a priest. His name was Samuel, and he was kind of spoke on behalf of God. And one day Samuel was hanging out, and some of the people of Israel came up and they decided they were going to talk to Samuel. So this is kind of how it happened. This is why we have presidents and kings and rulers and all that stuff. Here we go. 1 Samuel 8, verse 4 through 7. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You're old Isn't that a great thing to say to somebody? Hey, you know, that's my favorite line of my kids. You're old, you know? Yesterday I was at a volleyball tournament, and they play some sound bites between matches and different things, and they played Rocky. And I was looking around, and none of the kids were singing, and I realized that they don't know the theme to Rocky. So it's just like no one else is like punching anybody or doing anything. But they said to him, "You're old. Your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as the other nations have." They're looking around, they see that all these other nations who aren't following God, they have kings, they have rulers, and they say, hey Samuel, why don't you give us a king? Verse 6, but when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. Why did that displease Samuel? Well, first of all, they said he was old, you know. They're saying he's not capable. They're saying his sons are crazy, you know, which they were. They were good guys. But Samuel's displeased. And so Samuel goes and he prays to the Lord. And the Lord told him this: listen to all the people that are saying this to you. And here's the crazy thing that God says. It is not you they've rejected. God looks up at Samuel and says, don't take it personal, because guess what? It's not you who they rejected. They've rejected me as their king. See, before there were kings and presidents, God was the king. Before there were kings and presidents, God was the king. And from that moment on, you know, there were kings. The people, you know, wanted a king. They wanted somebody. But here's the crazy thing. Even though God let them have a king, there was always a prophet or a judge. There was always a representative of God that was with that king. And you know, when there was trouble when the king separated themselves from the prophet, or turned a deaf ear to the prophet. Or, guess what the kings did? They tried to execute the prophet. They just tried to take God completely out of the picture and kill his man who was providing advice and insight to them. I got news for you. In our current political state, I am tired. I am. I'm tired. I'm tired of all the dirt. I'm tired of all the negativity. And everyone bashing everybody else, and everybody's promising change. What will change the world? Nothing. Who will change the world? Jesus. If Jesus had a campaign speech, it would be found in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And this is literally where we're going to be over the next few weeks leading up to the elections. Jesus calls all of us who have put our faith and trust in Him to be His campaign manager, His supporter. If you knew someone whose life could be changed by someone else, if you knew that someone could change an entire world, that could change someone's eternity, wouldn't you get behind that person? Wouldn't you share that person with others? You see, the only way that you and I are going to change, the only way the country is going to change, the only way this world is going to change, the only way that Uncle, Eddie, Cousin Eddie is going to change, is that if you and I write on the ballot of our lives the name Jesus and accept Him and put Him first in our lives. And Jesus is going to share what He believes in and what He's all about over the next few weeks as we share through this passage of Scripture. And here's the thing: He doesn't promise the things that normal people promise. His financial policy, his foreign policy is not like anybody else's. But everything that Jesus says and believes in, even though it's different, it's incredibly profound. And it's exactly what will change your life and my life and the lives of those people we love and care about. And here's the thing: Jesus has left all of His campaigning up to you and me. I said this a few months ago, but here's the thing. As a Christ follower, we are the directional sign for Jesus. We are the ones who point others to Jesus. We're the campaign managers. We are the ones who are to show people who Jesus is and allow Him to bring Himself to their lives. There are two things that Jesus mentions. Now, If we were to start off in Matthew chapter 5, if we were to start off in this passage of Scripture, and I'm not going to share it with you today because I preached out of it a few weeks ago, but there's these attitudes, these wonderful, they're called beautiful attitudes, beatitudes, and they've kind of caught that title, but there's these we call them the happies, the happy are, you know, and he shares these things with his people, and he shares all of these things on what a Christ follower, on what it means to be happy, and they're different, you know. They're just not normal things that you normally share. And then he talks about these two things right after that passage of Scripture. Right after he shares this great opening to this campaign speech, if you want to call it that, but he shares these two things. And he says these two things that you and I are supposed to be as his campaign managers. The first one is this, salt. And the second one is this, light. Salt and light. One, when it comes in contact with food, it's incredible, you know. And the other, just totally when it's dark and when the lights are turned on, darkness just flees. It's gone. Disappears. And Jesus gets to sharing these beatitudes and these elements of the Christian life. And this next section deals with how we are to influence others. And he gets done saying, you know, that it's about being merciful, it's about being meek, it's about being a peacemaker, it's about being pure in heart. And then he says this in Matthew 5:13. Right after he shares these things, he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and to be trampled underfoot. See, Jesus realized that, you know, this common thing that we think, you know, we don't think much of it. It just kind of sits on our table, you know, and we use it once in a while, and the doctor tells us not to use as much of it, you know, but there's just, you know, salt doesn't seem like it's a really important thing. But back in Jesus' time, salt was extremely important. Here's some cool things that relates to salt during Jesus' day, okay? Here's some cool things about salt. In ancient times, salt was seen as the necessity of life. Because of its seasoning and preservative qualities, it was one of the most highly prized minerals. Not only that it was almost as good as cash. Salt was almost as good as cash. Matter of fact, sometimes the Roman soldiers, you know, sometimes people made payments to Roman soldiers with salt. It was that valuable to people. Scripture talks about thousands of years earlier that sometimes when newborns were born, they were rubbed with salt. They were cleansed. It was this idea that it was pure. Salt makes you thirsty. It's just the way it is. Not only that, seasoning. You know, in Bible times and today, we still use salt and we still use it to season food. And a small amount can go a long way to making something taste so much better. Salt was used to flavor offerings and sacrifices. It was used as preservative. Think about it. They didn't have ice. They didn't have refrigeration. They had to use salt to preserve everything that they had. This last one is awesome. It symbolizes friendship. It symbolizes friendship. So there's many sayings. There's a few in the Bible about a covenant of salt. And there's also about this whole idea that salt represented a relationship. There's this Arab saying that salt, you know, there's salt between us. There's this relationship. There's this kindred between us. Jesus looks at you and he looks at me as a follower of Jesus, a follower of him, and he says, you are the salt of the earth. You and I are the salt of the earth. And Jesus is saying, he's saying, first of all, to you and me, he says, look, salt changes things. A little salt can add flavor to a big pot of beans. It only takes, it takes on salt to flavor the whole community, a whole neighborhood, a whole workplace. See where Jesus is going? You see why he said it? Because you and I have influence because of him living inside of us. People can see him and experience him. But salt is no good if it only stays in the shaker. Salt is no good if it's only a decoration on the kitchen table. G.C. Campbell Morgan said it nicely when he said this. Jesus, looking out over the multitudes of his day, he saw corruption, the disintegration of life at every point, its breakup, its spoliation. And because of his love of the multitudes, he knew the thing that they needed most was the salt in order that the corruption should be arrested. Amidst corrupt people, we can call politicians corrupt all we want to, but I got news for you. They're not the only ones who are corrupt. Because at some point, you and I needed a little bit of salt in our lives because we too, God says that everyone has sinned. Everybody's fallen short of his glory. You too, you and I, were also corrupt. But here's the crazy thing. The thing about Jesus, and when you're truly his, when you truly put your faith and trust in him, you can't stay corrupt very long. He changes you and I from the inside out. We get to a point where all of us are corrupt at some level, but when we allow Jesus to live inside of us, he truly reveals to us and changes us. Because he comes inside and dwells in us, and his Spirit dwells in us, and he lives inside of us. And when people see that, when you show people how Jesus has changed your life, how he has seasoned your life, how he has spiced your life up, how he continues to change you and mold you and remove even the hint of evil in you and the corruption, when people see that, guess what? You and I are the salt of the earth. People take note. People see that. People admire that. People want a taste of that. Not only does Jesus say, you're the salt of the earth, but he also says this next in verse 14. He says this, you are the light of the world. A town that's built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. You see, this isn't foreign to Jesus. He made this statement, but let me tell you what they said. Let me tell you what this guy named John said about Jesus. He said something very similar about Jesus. John 1 through 5, it says this, in the beginning was the Word, that's Jesus, and the Word was with God, that's Jesus, and the Word was God, that's Jesus. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that had been made. And listen to this, verse 4, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. See, for every one of us who accepted Jesus as our King and our ruler, who was put him first in our heart, when you enter into that relationship with him, he's in your life, and he's the light of your life. Jesus is the light. Have you ever been in a place that's super, 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 super dark? Super dark. I don't mean in a room with no windows with the lights off. I don't mean when you pull down one of those sleeping things, over your eyes. I've experienced just this cold, hollow darkness a couple different times in my life. Once in Tijuana, we drove through the red light district of Tijuana, and you could just feel the despair and the hopelessness and the darkness. The other time was in Honduras when I was taking a tour. We were there trying to help and do some things after a hurricane just, hurricane and rain just came in, and the people that can't afford to build houses, on the nice places where the mudslides don't occur, they build them up on the mountains wherever they can build, and the rains come and just washes their homes away. And I was there in the neighborhood where they lost some families, and there's just it's the middle of the day, bright sunshine, and there's kids running around, and you just feel this. It just felt hopeless, felt dark. You leave that spot, and then you go to an evening of worship somewhere where people are singing, where people know who Jesus is, and it's just completely opposite. It's a completely opposite feeling, and it's two extremes. Why? Because Jesus is the light. With Jesus, your frown, my frown, has been turned upside down. The hopelessness that the world feels has become foreign to us. Everything that that brings despair to people, for us, those times are turned into hope. Those dark places where we allowed our own selves to go, are dispelled by light. That's what light does. That's what Jesus does when we enter into a relationship with Him, when we live our lives for Him. Some cool things about light. Let me talk a little bit about light. Light's energy, It's always moving. When light can't move anymore, when it gets absorbed, there's no more light. There's always a light source. There's always a source of light. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. The one thing that I love about light is when it's dark, and you turn the lights on, darkness is just exposed. It just disperses. It disappears. I think one of the cool ways that we can see this is when it's night out, but it's lightning, and all of a sudden you see this big bolt of lightning, and all of a sudden you can see everything. People are living in fear and living in darkness because of what's happening around. People are living in fear because of our current state of our country. People are living in fear because of politics, but it gets much more personal than that. Because people are living in fear because of their parents. They're scared of them. People are living in fear because they're being abused. People are hungry. People are living in fear because of their health or their job situation. People are living in fear because of their finances. And people are being pulled and are being bullied and pushed around. And people are living in fear. There's so many people that feel like they're living in the dark. And Jesus looks at you, and He looks at me, and He says, guess what? You are the light. You're my light. Jesus is the light of the hope, the light of the world, and the same hope and the same light that we have in our lives as Jesus followers is the same hope and the same life that we know that people around us need. There is only one true cure for the dark places that people find themselves in. There is only one cure for hopelessness, and it's not a what, it's a who. His name is Jesus. And we walk around people, and we come in contact with people every single day who are in the dark. Light serves as a guide. Just like airport runway lights help planes see. Just like when we turn the car on and we leave, at 11 o'clock at night, but we don't turn the lights on. Can't see. Light serves as a guide. Matthew chapter 5, verse 15 says this. It says, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to the whole house. See, you and I, when we think about this, we're like, well, that seems odd. Why would somebody light a lamp and cover it up? Well, the reason being is this. In Palestinian times, in Jesus' times, homes were generally pretty dark at night. No electricity. And so they would have a bowl of oil with a wick. But here, guess what the toughest part of that is? Lighting that lamp because there's no matches. There's no those little lighter things, There's none of that. So they would struggle. They would have to light this lamp. But then let's say they would go somewhere for a little bit, and it would be a bummer because they'd have to put that light out, and they think that so what they would do is they would move that lamp off its stand and they would place it under something so that it would kind of shield that light, and then they would go do their business. They would come back, they'd take it off, they'd put it back on the stand. When they needed light, the lamp was placed on the lampstand. The most difficult thing was lighting it, time and time again. No one, and Jesus is saying, the first time you light that, you're not lighting it to cover it up. You're lighting it because you're going to set it out. You want to give light to all those around. See, you and I are the campaign managers of Jesus. I don't like politics. I don't want to volunteer in a political office. I don't do it, but guess what? I got news for you. I'm a campaign manager of Jesus. I am. We are the ones who point people to Him. And if you're in a relationship with someone and they trust you, it could be a boss, it could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a son, it could be a daughter, it could be a coworker. If you're in a relationship with someone and they trust you, if they don't know who Jesus is, if they're not in a relationship with Him, it's time to have a little sit down. It's time to have a cup of coffee. It's time to share with them who Jesus means to you. Let me say it again. If you're in a relationship with someone and they trust you, that's very key. Okay? Don't have this talk with someone who doesn't trust you. It won't go well for you or for Jesus. But if you're in a relationship with someone and they trust you, and if they don't know who Jesus is, if they're not in a relationship with Jesus, it's time to have a conversation. Your friends at school, your relatives, your kids, your boss, your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends. Because without a relationship with Jesus, people will not discover this adventure. Their life will not get any seasoning. And they won't experience the salt that adds so much to our lives. Without a relationship with Jesus, your friends will fall back into despair, into the dark places, into the hopelessness, and everything about them might look great on the outside. And you might think they got it all together, but I got news for you. Being without Jesus is just a place of despair and fear, and that will always be on the horizon. Jesus contrasts all this political stuff that we see and hear and read about by bringing hope and light. Jesus is a different kind of person. He's a different kind of candidate. He's a different type of leader. Jesus promises change, but guess what? Change is real and true and lasting. And it flows from the hearts of His people, from you and I. A guy by the name of Dwight Moody said this. He said, "It is yet to be seen what God can do with men or women who yield themselves completely to God." It remains to be seen what God can do with men and women who will yield themselves completely to God. So what's the next step? Well, the first one is this. Are you living in fear? Are you afraid? And my question to you is this. Have you put your faith and your trust in Jesus? Are you in a relationship with Him? And if not, I'd love to talk with you more about that. And we give you that opportunity to do it a couple different ways. One, I'll be in the cafe area after the service today. Two, there's a tear-off on the bottom of the bulletin that says, I'd like to talk more about Jesus. And I'd love to talk with you more about Him. You can fill that out. You can drop that in the basket here in just a few minutes. Second thing is this. Are you salt and are you light? Are you the campaign manager of the one and the only one who will truly change the world, who can only give hope to your friends and your loved ones? Who have you talked about? Who have you talked to about Jesus lately? And you don't even have to start there. Just start to pray for one person in your life. Pray for opportunity. about how to share Jesus who's given you hope. And you may just start by invite. You know what? Guess what? I'll talk to them if you just invite them. We do it every Sunday. I'll share with them. Do whatever it takes, because Jesus is the hope for the world, and He's our hope, and He's our light. Father, we thank you for